Hello comic fans, here's Al Gray with the first half of my top 20 with my favorite new editions that came out in 2023. New editions of older comics to be precise. So, on 20 there is the collected edition of Michel Vaillant. In France, this edition is already published in its entirety, I guess, but the German edition is still ongoing. The last one that came out was Volume 9, if I'm not mistaken. Very effectful, old school, old-fashioned stories about alpha males in fast cars. You like it or you don't. I've never been into the racing sport and not even into cars too much, but these comics always have gotten my attention since I was a child. By the way, and full disclosure, the ranks 20 up to 11 are all occupied with books that I hold dear and love, but I would be very hesitant to recommend them outside the respective cycle of people with special interests in the genre or the particular style. And this is very much true for my rank 19 as well. Detective Carroll is a private investigator in a future world. Well, the world building is far from spectacular, just some flying vehicles, robots, and some alien friends and opponents. That's it. It's just this story of a female detective and her intelligent cat companion, drawn with a lot of charm and style by Eddie Pape, the same artist who was responsible for Luc Orient. This relatively slim hardcover is a complete one-and-done collection, which is kinda nice as well. On 18 is L. Franck, or Le Franck. He's one of the countless journalist/detective heroes in European comics, and it's my fave comic by Jacques Martin, probably because I don't care too much about Jacques Martin, actually. And most of these comics were done by other creators and not by him. There's a roster of hired writers and artists who are able to do a very solid ligne claire rendering of different adventures. And the adventures achieve to surprise me almost every time with some new angle on familiar tropes, despite of the deliberately old-fashioned art style. But this is obviously not a contradiction anyways. On 17 is UCC Dolores by Didier and Lise Tarquin, about a young nun leaving a monastery in space. She inherited an old spaceship, a battleship named, yeah, you guessed it, UCC Dolores. And a motley crew of characters are part of the prize as well. For instance, there's a guy who looks like taken right out of Fear Agent, and the story gives me a bit of the same vibes like Fear Agent, even though it's not as good. The characters, especially the female ones, look quite generic, but the world building is nice, and these kind of sci-fi stories are totally up my alley. I should eventually read the other UCC Dolores albums that have come out so far. On rank 16 is now number 12, the most recent volume of Fantagraphics, of the anthology series by Fantagraphics. It's always a nice mix of far-out art comics, too far out to be understood by yours truly, and some more light-hearted, funny and comprehensible stuff in between, so that I don't feel too dumb. The comprehensible comics in Volume 12 were delivered most and foremost by Noah Van Sciver and Tim Lane, but I do like the variety of art comics, for the lack of a better word, in Now as well. By the way, I just saw that Now will be continued with number 13 this summer, which is great. Give me a slipcase. Give me a slipcase with a die-cut cover. Give me a slipcase with a die-cut cover and a hardcover inside with glow-in-the-dark on it, and I'm defenseless. But in this case I'm a very happy victim of these selling antics, because the comics in the second collection of The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror are almost as excellent as the packaging. Funny spoofs on a lot of different horror movies and genres, drawn by a wide roster of artists. Great fun that will be concluded with a third volume by Abrams Comic Arts. Back to old European classics, which kind of dominate this video quite a bit. On 14 we have Bob Moraine by William Vance. Well, quite frankly, I'm fully aware of the fact that hardly anyone younger than, let's say, 50 would dig these adventure comics. A bit of sci-fi, a bit of time travel, a bit of this and that, but it's always certain that our square-jawed heroes will survive. Pulp comics by the same artist who drew Bruno Brazil 13 and other European classics later on. On rank 13 there's Sigma Gigantic, a comic produced for the German Zack comic magazine in the late 70s. I'm glad that they kept the original coloring with lots of pastel colors, even if the skin of the astronauts often is yellow. Sigma Gigantic is an asteroid made into some doppelganger of Earth, respectively into some huge spaceship. And therefore, yes, you will get some familiar Star Trek, Star Wars and Battleship Galactica vibes, but the comic is even more tropey than these predecessors, and more colorful, much more colorful. On rank 12 is Agent 327. Agent of the Dutch Secret Service, written by the Dutch Martin Lodewijk with some Dutch wit, and I can't stop to praise the series. In my opinion, one of the best James Bond spoofs ever, Dutch or otherwise. And finally for today, and on rank 11, is the first volume of the collected edition of Adler, written and drawn by René Stern. The main protagonist, Adler, deserted from the German army during the Second World War. In Africa and not in the Pacific, and as I said it, the story takes place during the Second and not the First World War. Still, the stories have a slight Corto Maltese feel, regardless of being absolutely something unique and drawn in Stern's very own blend of ligne claire. Very reduced, very cool, a very stylish style. I'm currently reading the second volume of the collected edition of Adler, and it is as good as the first one. So, that's it for this video. In the next video I will show you my top 10 in terms of my favorite recollections, re-editions, re-whatever of older comics. And in the video after that video we will finally come to my top 10 of new comics from 2023. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.